Hey, deserving listeners, it's just me today. I thought I would answer some upper tier patron emails. Let's get to this first one. Anonymous annual upper tier patron asks, children who kill other children, do they know that it is wrong? Are you familiar with the James Bulger case? It was huge here in the UK. These two 10-year-old boys had befriended a toddler at a shopping center and then tortured and murdered him. They were then held in a Young Offenders Institute until the age of 18 and were given new identities upon release. Just chiming in here. Yeah, I've read about this case in journal articles, actually. I didn't know about it outside of that. For some reason, it didn't reach my sphere when I was 22 in 1993. But yeah, it happened in 1993. It was a 2-year-old boy, James Bulger, was tortured and murdered by two 10-year-old boys. There was a huge media circus, from what I understand, and a national panic, as I've heard it described, and an outcry to punish the two 10-year-old boys in a severe way. And there was a lot of talk about how old one can be to be held responsible for this sort of, the bottom line is just a horrific murder, horrific death of a 2-year-old boy. And, it's just completely tragic going on with your email. Within the literature, does anything point towards children's inability to understand how inhumane and wrong these actions are? Just chiming in here. Yeah, there's a lot of literature. In fact, due to this case, there was a huge report produced in 1996. So because of this case, from what I understand, there was a commission or a group or funding or something that was put together to look into this very question. How old is someone? How old does someone need to be in order for them to be held criminally responsible for their actions? Why did this happen? That kind of thing. And a huge report was published in 1996 called Children and Homicide. And the report argued that children should be treated differently for two reasons than adults. Number one, they are still developing and thus may not understand what they're doing. They don't understand what murder means. They don't necessarily understand bigger issues of right and wrong. Typical 10-year-olds understand right and wrong to an extent, but they might not understand the big picture, right? To the extent that they understand that murdering someone is the way that we understand it as adults, Anyway. And number two, children have a greater chance of changing their ways if they're given the right environment and possible treatment, right? For children to commit an act like this, it's not uncommon for them to be released. The recidivism rate for these kinds of crimes is not very high from what we understand, especially if people are able to reform in treatment. Because, there's different kinds of incarceration, right? You can just incarcerate a teenager or a 10-year-old, and it could go wrong for them, right? They could learn all the wrong things. They could meet people who are also criminals. They could be traumatized in prison, or they can get proper treatment and thus be a lot less likely to do anything in the future, right? So there's that. And the age of criminal responsibility, they argued in the report, should be between 12 and 14. For example, in the United States, the age of criminal responsibility is 14. But in the UK, it's still 10, which is the lowest in Europe. And it was reduced to 10 in 1998. So if you look at the timeline here, you have the crime and the national panic that happened in 1993, and then that starts the movement to reduce the age to 10, which happened in 1998, 5 years later, right? And it still hasn't been changed. It's still 10. And then you ask, going on with your email, when children commit a crime to this degree, can they reform from such acts, such as murder, and progress into society? End of email. my answer to that is yes. Children can reform from these criminal acts, these murders. 10-year-olds who murder can reform and have reformed. The data shows that. But really, anyone of any age can reform if given the right opportunity. There seem to be some extreme outliers, people who will not very likely reform and thus should be kept behind bars for the rest of their life for the safety of society. But way too many people are incarcerated much longer than they would need to be. And also, from what I understand, it kind of varies, but there's a lot of variability in the treatment and the help that incarcerated individuals will get so that they can reform. And then once they're released, they need a lot of help to get back on their feet and avoid the similar pitfalls that led them to crimes to begin with. Things like trauma recovery, trauma treatment, treatment for other issues, medical health issues. There's a lot of medical issues that these people might suffer from. Addiction recovery support would be necessary, just general support. A job, for example. Some people might have a hard time getting a job. And of course, attachments, proper attachments. When people are given these things, or that somehow they manage to set this up for themselves, there's a much lower chance that they will recidivate, that they will commit another crime. And it's particularly true for 10-year-olds. So can they reform? Yeah. And, this raises the age-old question in criminal justice as to, well, why are we sending people to prison in the first place? Are we sending them there because we want revenge against them? Are we sending them there to protect from the public, get them away from the public so they don't commit these crimes again? Are we sending them there to reform them, to help them to change so that they don't commit these, and once it's demonstrated that they're not likely to commit these crimes again, do we release them or do we keep them in because we just want to make them feel the pain of what they did? There's a lot of debate around this, and I don't know the answer to that. I think in a perfect world, we would be high-minded and think along the lines of, well, prison is for reform, and if someone can demonstrate that they're not likely to commit these crimes again for whatever reason, then they should be released, right? It's inhumane to keep someone incarcerated basically for no reason other than it just emotionally makes us feel good that they're being punished, right? But I'm not going to lie. If someone were to hurt someone I loved, I'm pretty sure I would probably also say that they should, rot in prison, that they should go to prison for the rest of their life. And I don't care if they're reformed because of what they did to someone that I loved. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to it. But, the bottom line is that if you can be a part of the movement in the UK to raise the criminal responsibility age from 10 to at least 12, but 14 would be preferred, and even 14 is a little questionable, but I think once people become 14, 15, 16, we can start to be assured that these individuals have at least enough capacity to understand what they're doing and the difference between right and wrong. So there's that. The other thing is that the rate at which 10-year-olds are murdering people is so small. It's such a rare situation that happens that it's not this epidemic that I think everyone was worried that was going to happen in 1993. Everyone was like, oh my God, our society's going down the tubes. And it just isn't that way. And also punishing anyone doesn't necessarily reduce the rates of crime. What reduces the rates of crime is if we actually get at the underlying issues, the attachment, the education, the support, the connection. I even think people like Ted Bundy, who is just a classic example of a horrific, sadistic, narcissistic, psychopathic serial killer. I believe that if he had a secure relationship, even maybe after some of his murders, he would have, in all likelihood, not committed further murder. I can't know that, of course, and I could be convinced otherwise maybe if someone was really adamant about it, but I've seen it enough and I've heard enough from the experts. That's really what I pull from mostly, is because this isn't really my area. This isn't my specialty, but I've spoken with a lot of experts who work on the front lines with these folks. And, some of you might remember I interviewed that individual who treats people who are sexual offenders. And what she was saying was that everyone she treats is treatable. And when they have proper attachments, emotional regulation, trauma recovery, then they don't have any desire to commit sexual assaults on children or anyone else. The sexual assault emerged from maybe they had a tendency for it, but the fact that they committed the act was because so many other things in their life were going wrong. Now, it doesn't justify the act, of course, and not everyone is capable of doing these things, of course, but if we're really interested in reducing the rate of these crimes, we should be doing a lot of proactive things and doing things retroactively, like locking people up and increasing prison times and lowering the age of criminal responsibility is just misguided. And this is just yet another reason why I wish our society, our government, our news organizations, our people were more scientifically oriented, because if everyone was, we would follow the science, and that would actually benefit everybody. It's just really, I get so frustrated with, not this isn't what frustrates me, it's all the other stuff that frustrates me about my society and the societies around the world that just don't follow the science. They just don't follow the data. They don't listen to the experts. And I just don't understand that. When I have a pain, say I have something weird going on with my heart, I don't go to Facebook. I don't just imagine what could be going on with my heart. I go to a fucking expert, a heart doctor, a physician that has the data and the expertise and the research and the access to knowledge and the access to testing measures and the know-how and the colleagues and the equipment. That's who I go to. But somehow with so many other things, particularly in political arenas, we just completely ignore the fact that there's data on this issue. So yeah, anyway, I'm just anonymous up-tier patron emailed in, and she said, "What are the pros and cons of attending family therapy with my aggressive brother? My immediate family has always been dysfunctional, and we've never gotten along. We all have grudges and arguments with each other. I especially have had a lot of turmoil with my brother, who is an aggressive and violent person. We had a huge argument, and he attempted to kill me." Whoa, yikes. "We had a huge argument, and my brother attempted to kill me. My mom has mentioned to me that she has been attending therapy with my dad and my brother, and she would like it if I attended when I'm in town. I think it's an excellent idea for them to go to therapy, but I have several reservations about joining in these sessions. Firstly, I live on the opposite coast, so I don't know how useful it would be to attend one session. Also, even though it's been a long time since our altercation, I'm still somewhat terrified of my brother. Do you have any insights or thoughts on why it would be beneficial for me to join in for a session?" End of email. Yeah, well, first off, to be threatened with murder from your brother would be terrifying. That's awful. It's abusive. It's traumatizing. So yeah, I hope you're getting help for that. And then you're asking about the pros and the cons of attending this one-off session. So you're saying that your mom, your dad, and your brother all go to therapy regularly, and you would join in for a one-off session. Okay, well, the pros would be that you could voice your experience with a professional there, which it's critical that the therapist understand your perspective to help the family and to help your brother. It's up to you whether or not you want to bother with it. But you could also, voice your issue and just be like, "Hey, I'm going to talk for the next 15 minutes, and y'all are going to listen to me. Brother of mine da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I need you to apologize. I need you to reassure me that you're not going to hurt me or kill me. That was awful. I could call the police on you, and I didn't do, whatever. Also, I suppose reconciliation could occur. I mean, you never know. The therapist might be able to engineer that. And you might be able to gain some safety from it if you head into it with that goal in mind. It's not, now the cons are, of course, that it could re-traumatize you just being around him, even in therapy, and it could get violent. So, I don't know what I would do if I were in your shoes. That's for sure. All right, this next email is from our dear patron Kristen from Portland. She has a proposal to change Love is Blind to make it better so that more people will marry in the end. And she says, what do you think about an experience? So if you don't know what Love is Blind is, it's where they get 15 heterosexual cis men, 15 heterosexual cis women, and they are in separate areas of a compound, if you will, and they all meet in these pods, speed dating, and they don't get to see each other. So all they do is hear each other's voices, and I think they're instructed to refrain from describing themselves, both body and looks and race and everything. So you're falling in love with a voice, a personality, and then when you propose and you become engaged, and then you get to see each other, and then you take a month or two to see if you actually will in fact get married. Anyway, Kristen says, what do you think about a better thing, which would be an experiment of single participants, 15 men and 15 women, who go through a training curriculum to help them deepen self-awareness and build adult relationship skills? After completing this curriculum, weekly group events would be offered, focused just on being social together and having fun, maybe bowling, a cooking class, etc. It would be up to the participants at that point to pair up organically and pursue their own relationships. My question is, do you think this model would yield better results than 2 marriages per cohort of 15 men and 15 women? End of email. Yeah, just so you know that there's been 3 seasons of Love is Blind, and out of the 15 possible couples, they will follow 6 couples afterwards. There's been reports that some people actually become engaged, but they don't get filmed or they don't get edited into the show or something. But at the very least, the way that they make the show look is that out of the 15 possible couples, only 6 actually become engaged. And each season, 2 of the 6 end up actually getting married in the end. And so would your model, Kristen, produce better results? Probably, but I don't know. I mean, this is why we have research. You'd have to gather the data. Intuitively, your model would work a lot better, right? Because there's a training curriculum to help them deepen their self-awareness and build adult relationship skills. There's also a more organic experience of getting to know each other. Plus, they can actually see each other, I presume, because you didn't mention any kind of lack of being able to see each other. So, because, a lot of chemistry is in being with people in 3 dimensions, right? And I think that is why the show doesn't work out for a lot of couples, because they have chemistry through a wall, but then they meet each other and they're just as, it's not only just how someone looks, but eye contact, the way they smell, the way they hold your hand, the way they kiss, the way they hug you, the way they move, the way they use nonverbal communication. We're not just verbal creatures. I think that's the premise of the show, that, well, if you fall in love with someone in the pods, then you're falling in love with the real person, right? It's not the suit. They break down all of human experience and relationship into 2 domains. You have the personality, which to them is communicated through voice only, as if you could get to know someone over the phone, essentially, is what it'd be like, right? And then the other dimension to humans are their looks and their race, and their weight, this sort of thing. And it's much more complicated. There's a lot of things left out of that, right? Like I said, nonverbal, smell, touch, hug, kiss, eye contact, smile, all that kind of stuff intangible things that are very important to communication and relationships. And anyway, so, but would your model work better? Yeah, probably, but hard to know. I could see a scenario where it actually doesn't work any better, because I could see the show, the way that it is designed, potentially facilitating relationships that wouldn't happen otherwise. Now, so let's look at the data first, actually. So you say that in each season, 2 out of the 6 end up getting married. Well, let's look more closely at that. So we have season 1 with Barnett and Amber and Lauren and Cam, and they're both still married as of now, which is, I think, 3 years after this season was filmed, maybe 4 years after this season was filmed. And I think everyone can agree that Lauren and Cam are a pretty good couple. Hard to tell, but they seem like a pretty stable, healthy couple. Barnett and Amber, I don't know. We'll have to see, because in 5 years, will they still be married? I don't know. We'll have to see. Season 2, we had Iana and Jarrett, and Danielle and Nick. Both those couples are now divorced. So no couples got married in the end. I mean, you could say they got married, but they didn't stay married for very long. I think they, at the most, were married for a year, which I wouldn't really call like a marriage. You know what I mean? It sounds like they gave it a shot and it didn't work. Season 3, which just was filmed, I think, about a year ago, and we have 2 couples that are still married, Alexa and Brennan, and Matt and Colleen. It's hard to tell with either of them. I think a lot of people would say Matt and Colleen are doomed, but I don't know. It's really hard to tell. Alexa and Brennan seem perfectly happy and compatible, but you just never know. So we don't really know. But when we see this, I'll say that it's possible that Love is Blind would be better given how you're measuring it. You're measuring it on 2 marriages per 30 people. 4 people get married out of the 30 people possible. Would your model be better or worse? I could see where your model would be worse in that measure, but it wouldn't be worse in my mind because it would be better. But because the show, I wonder sometimes it's not just the fact that you're in these pods speaking through a wall. There are many other aspects of the quote-unquote experiment that they don't highlight or even mention. One of which is that when they enter this compound, they have to give up their phones, and they don't have internet access. So they're just sitting around in a very strange situation where they have no contact with their friends or family or work or their Instagram or the internet or TV, or maybe there's a TV with like just regular TV and DVDs, or I don't know, streaming DVDs. I have a hard time believing that they wouldn't have something like that. But anyway, so that's strange, right? And you're also, you can't see anybody. You don't work. You're on this really weird vacation. And I think it's for like 7 days, maybe longer. And you're with all these new people, and you bond with the people on your side of the compound. You become really good friends because you're spending all this time together. And then you start going on these speed dates with these other people, and you have no distractions, and you're desperate for connection because you're so essentially lonely because you're cut off from all your relationships. So it really amplifies these individuals on the other side of the wall. And then you start to, and the other thing is you probably months ago when you decided to come on the show, for many of the individuals, they are like, maybe I'll meet the love of my life. So there's this huge buildup of expectation, right? It's similar to, I don't know the data on this, but if you set someone up on a blind date, for example, and you set it up and you're just like, oh my God, this person is perfect for you. This is what I think matchmakers do. I think it's a lot of hype that they produce. And when you have that amount of hype injected into your limbic system and your sexuality, I suppose, it amplifies your receptivity to the other person. And I think there's a lot of that in Love is Blind in the pods. So people are falling in love with individuals that they probably wouldn't otherwise if they were in the regular world. I don't know that, but I think that's absolutely possible. And so it's possible that your model would actually produce fewer couples because you don't say anything about cutting them off from the outside world, and they still have access to, the internet and Tinder and their ex-partners, right? They'll be like flirting with someone online or so. I think there's just a lot of distractions, So I don't know. But would your model, in all likelihood, in the long run, benefit individuals to have relationships that are sustainable over time? Yeah, absolutely. Like, one way to alter Love is Blind on a lot of these shows is once they are in person, if you just have someone like myself, not me, because I would never do it, and they would never ask me, but you just have someone behind the scenes, and it's not filmed, so it's not corrupted by the producers. You just have someone behind the scenes, like if you watch this show, you had Cole and Zeneb. If someone was there ground zero that first day with Cole and Zeneb, I'm pretty sure they could have set that right. It wasn't, you'll often hear me talking when I'm doing my reaction videos that the issues that we're seeing in this couple are pretty mundane. And when I watch them, I'm just like, oh, it's so easy to fix. It's just a small thing. We just have to talk about this and get you to say, go in this direction and, communicate like this and use I statements and greater understanding, and normalization and acknowledgement of vulnerability, discussion of vulnerability, receptivity to vulnerability. It's fixable. And the show, I don't think they're really interested in fixing it because they definitely want drama, right? Now, the individuals, they're free to do what they want to, of course, but that's what I would change. I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't increase it by a lot in terms of the amount of couples that would get married, but I think it would increase it. Like Cole and Zeneb, I think they had a chance. There were other couples that I think some couples never had a chance because I think some couples, as soon as they see each other in person, they're just like, oh, no, there's zero chemistry. I don't feel it at all with this person, and I never will. And, or even with Danielle and Nick, actually, I think a lot of damage happened. They're a divorced couple from season 2. I think a lot of damage happened, even just in those initial months that we saw them on the show, that I was like, oh, that's going to be hard. In fact, I saw signs that they were they were sweeping it under the rug to some extent, but they were building resentments for each other, particularly Nick towards her. So, I think that would have helped. All right, let's take a break. More emails when we return. All right, we're back from the break. I want to do an OPP, an old patron praise, for these individuals who became a patron in 2020, 3 years ago, and have stayed patrons ever since. We have Michael from Naples, Florida. We have Kay from California. We have Paige from Tennessee. Andrea from Bellevue, Washington. Annual patron Andrea. Ashanti from God knows where. Juliana from Washington, D.C. We have upper tier patron Avery from Ontario. We have upper tier patron, annual patron Marcus from Austin, Texas. Adrian from God knows where. Evangeline from Great Britain. We have Sophie from God knows where. Joan from Oakland, California. Chris from God knows where. Nicole from California. Elizabeth Jung Yoon and Kendall from God knows where, Matt from Portland, Oregon, Christian from Illinois, Nav from Brooklyn, New York, and Linda from Burbank, California. Annual upper tier patron Linda. Thank you so much for being a patron and staying a patron through thick and thin. All right, let's get to the next question here. Annual or an anonymous upper tier patron, she says, genetic testing has become wildly popular, and there's a chance that it may reveal a one-night stand I had 30 plus years ago. Let me explain. My former spouse, who is now deceased, may or may not have been the father of my first child, although this possibility has never been revealed to anyone. A second child, 2 years later, was definitely from that union with my former spouse, and both children share a similar appearance. However, I have a nagging suspicion in the back of my mind that if both children were to take a genetic test today, there is perhaps a 50% chance that it might reveal that they are only half siblings and that my first child was from a one-night stand I had. This would definitely lead to a painful revelation and feelings of lifelong betrayal. What are the arguments for and against revealing this possibility now, preemptively, or waiting and explaining it later if it does reveal the infidelity at some point down the road? End of email. Yeah, this is a very good question, anonymous upper-tier patron, and I understand why you're being anonymous at this point. And it's a common question, and a question that I think more people should be asking themselves. So there's lots to say. One is, there's nothing to be ashamed of. This is 30 plus years ago, and you had a one-night, from the way you describe it, you had a one-night stand, and then you met your former spouse, who is now deceased, and also had sex with him, and then you got pregnant, and then eventually got married, and then you just figured, well, I'm pretty sure that this is my husband's kid, but I'm not quite sure. So, but there's no real reason to say anything about it to anyone, and it doesn't really matter because my husband will be the father for. I just don't want to mess it up. And then you have your second kid, and you're like, oh, thank God they look similar. So there's no kind of alert there in terms of revealing that they might be from different fathers. So, I get it, especially in the decade that this was happening for you. There's a lot of shame, and there still is, but we're supposedly able to free ourselves from that. We don't need to be ashamed of those things. Now, you didn't say this, but it sounds like it could have been a cheating situation, which would be a kind of an issue, right? And could hurt your kids. Your former husband is now deceased, so he's not around to be harmed by that. But so it's complicated by that. But if it isn't cheating, I'm just trying to imagine how would I feel if my parents told me this? It would be a big deal, and I would be hurt that I wasn't told earlier. So it's because that's the thing. Like, there's a chance that one of them, or both of them, will get a DNA test, and then they'll figure it out anyway. And they might figure it out before you die, and then you can actually explain it to them. They might figure it out after you die, and then you're not there to mitigate anything, and they're just left in the dark about what happened. The other possibility is their kids could have DNA testing, and then it will be revealed. So what's the chance that your kids and all of their kids and potentially all of their grandkids never have a DNA test and compare? Because as DNA testing gets more refined over time, it's going to be, even, and it might even be there now, to tell, even with great grandkids, if of yours, they'll be able to tell. I can't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's because when I took my DNA tests on 2 different sites, and they're pretty accurate. They'll, like one of my cousins or my third cousins will take a test, and it'll be like, hey, you have a match on your DNA. This person is a third cousin. And I'm like, yep, actually that person is a third cousin. You got it right. It's pretty amazing. So anyway, it's probably a done deal that this will come out, and you'd rather get out ahead of it, right? So you're saying that, this would definitely lead to a painful revelation and a feeling of lifelong betrayal. Yes, but to what degree? And I could imagine the kids reacting a lot of different ways. And, the kid in question, right? Now, it's not it's not a done deal because, okay, so let's walk ourselves through it. This is what I would do. I'm not saying you should do this because I can't tell you what to do because I don't know your situation, and even if I did know your situation, I still wouldn't presume to know what you should do because you're you and I'm me. But if I were in your shoes, I would say something. I wouldn't feel great about it, but I would tell the kid in question, and I just go to the kid and I would say, so I got to tell you something. This is a big deal. And let me tell you, okay, so when I was young, I had this one night stand and I didn't use protection, and bear with me here. And then I met your dad and we also had sex, and I also didn't use protection. I found out a couple months later I was pregnant with you, and I immediately worked out the math. And at first I figured it must be your dad that was the dad. But as time went on, I figured out they started to triangulate the exact date of conception. And it was right on the borderline between your dad and this one night stand. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't want to tell your dad about it because I was worried he was going to leave me, or he would see you differently. And so I just swept it under the rug, and I thought, well, let's just say this kid is probably biologically, related to my husband. And we raised you, and everything went well. And I never told your dad. And when your sibling was born, which is definitely your dad's, I never had sex with anyone else during that time, and definitely your dad's. And when the two of you looked alike, I was like, okay, maybe I can be reassured. But with all these DNA tests, I can't know for sure that you are dad's kid, biological kid. And I feel so ashamed for not telling you earlier, but I just figured what would be the good that would come from me telling you that, especially when you're a kid, right? And also when your dad was alive. Like I just thought it'd break his heart. And I don't know if I was the right choice. I just feel so bad. But I think you're old enough now, and I want to tell you also, I'm worried that you and your sibling are going to get a DNA test, and you'll figure it out anyway. And so I just thought I'd tell you that. And if you do find out with a DNA test that you are, in fact, a biological child of this other individual, it's up to you. But I'll give you this person's name, and you could track this person down. And I'm open to whatever you want to do. Is the thing. This is the lie that I've been holding on to, and I feel like I just wanted to tell you that. I'll tell you, I raised you as we raised you as our son. We never thought of you as anything other than that. It just is this question of DNA. That's the question, and I just wanted you to know that for a variety of, also, if there are medical kind of genetic issues that maybe this other guy had, if you are in fact the biological child, that you should probably know about that stuff. So yeah, so that'd be one version, depending on the kid's facial expression. And by kid, we're talking about someone in their 30s, right? I would, that's what I'd say, because the hurt down the road is potentially so much greater if they find out and then come to you with it. That could be a lot more hurtful. And then if they find out after you're gone, after you die, that would not only be hurtful, but very frustrating, because they wouldn't even know where to begin on. Well, I guess they could look at other DNA records, right? They could try to figure that out. Do they allow? Well, yeah, I guess they do, right? Like, on Ancestry.com, or was that the one I used, or 23andMe? They, those are the two ones I used. They just automatically connect you with people. So, if your first child were to do a DNA test, they might get the biological father might have also done a DNA test, and thus the results will instantly tell that your child who their father is. So they would have that, or at least the username, because sometimes on these sites you use an alias, and then your child would be able to direct message the biological father. So it happened pretty quickly. It depends. Or if, anyway. Now, there's also a chance that it was all for nothing. Let's say that your kids do get the DNA test, turns out they're full siblings, and then you just have a kind of funny, interesting story to tell your kids. Be like, well, if you want to know the details of mom's sordid past, I'll tell you about this one night stand that happened in the 90s. We were listening to the Gin Blossoms and Soundgarden and 311 and Sublime and the Smashing Pumpkins and TLC. Was TLC a thing in the 90s? I feel like they were. Anyway, let's go on to another question. Upper tier patron Tybalt from Georgia says, is my polyamorous asexual relationship with a friend doomed? Let me explain. I am a male aro ace. So that is ARO. It stands for aromantic or aromantic spectrum. And then ace is asexual or asexual spectrum going on. So I am male, aromantic, and asexual. My female roommate is a longtime friend that is very important to me. She is in a sexual and romantic relationship with another man, but refers to me as her partner, and has talked to her boyfriend about how all three of us are in a polyamorous relationship where he provides the touch and the sex for her, and I am the stable partner that provides her with a drama-free and financially stable place to live. I don't mind this situation, but I'm not comfortable with the polyamorous label, especially since we haven't all sat down and had a conversation. Do you think that this is a healthy relationship, or is it doomed to implode? I'm convinced, based on my own issues around abandonment, that eventually she is going to leave and move in with him, though she assures me that she won't. She's even talked about buying a house together with me, but I don't see her sexual partner being okay with this, and I feel that the dynamics are going to vastly change if they decide that they want to have children. End of email. So you ask, is it doomed? And my answer to that is, I don't hear any signs of that in your email. In fact, it sounds like she's wanting to spend potentially the rest of her life with you. She, assures you that she's not going to leave you. And also she is at least playing around with the idea of buying a house with you. So, it sounds like she's in it to win it with you. And, having said that, all relationships are uncertain. But there's nothing about this polyamorous relationship that is particularly concerning to me in terms of the longevity. But I would talk about it with them, with both of them. I would assert your needs and your wants. You say you're not comfortable with the polyamorous label. What does that mean? Does that mean that you don't want to be in a polyamorous relationship with this individual, or what? What does it mean exactly? But it kind of sounds like the perfect polycule, mini polycule of three people. It sounds like you and her are best friends, really close friends, and you like to be together, but you don't want romance in your life and you don't want sex in your life. So you have this really great companionship relationship with someone that you live with, and she really values you and loves that you're drama-free, meaning I'm guessing that you don't fight about anything and that you're financially stable and you like to provide that, and you get a lot of attachment needs met through this relationship. And then to get her romantic and sexual needs met, she has a relationship with someone outside and this other guy. And so, you say, well, what if they decide that they want to have children? Well, it's hard to say, but I could see a scenario where the three of you, if you wanted to, of course, it all just depended on what you wanted to do, the three of you decided that you would all live together, and then the two of them have kids and get married, and then you are there as Uncle Tybalt from Georgia, and everything could be great. So yeah, I don't hear anything that is concerning, but like I said, all relationships have uncertainty. All right, let's take a break. We get back, more emails. All right, we're back from the break. Upper tier patron Jen from Philadelphia, she says, a few weeks ago, my mother was involved in a very serious car accident as a passenger. She was not expected to live and suffered a very serious brain bleed. She spent days in the ICU and weeks in inpatient rehab and is now staying with me while she recovers. We're very lucky because she's made miraculous progress to the point where she can walk and talk and is almost her normal self. However, she doesn't remember the accident. She keeps saying she's terrified that the memory of the accident will come back to her. Is it possible for her to remember the accident if she doesn't remember it now? If so, do you have any advice on how I could prepare her for that? End of email. Well, first off, that's a terrifying situation. Your mom almost died, and now she's recovering. You're there helping her, and your mom's now worried and terrified that she's going to remember this sort of thing. So, there's a lot of stress there. There's a lot of worry. But to answer your questions, yeah, it's very possible that she will remember the accident at some point. It's also possible that she won't. These things are impossible to predict, really. But given the time span, if it was a few weeks ago and she still hasn't remembered, I don't know. It's hard to say. If I were to put my money down on something, I would say that she won't ever remember it. But, you never know. Bottom line, though, she needs therapy for a variety of reasons. She's been through something very traumatic, and maybe family therapy would help as well for you. It couldn't hurt. And so there's a lot of things that could be addressed through there. And if she did remember, then a therapist would be there to help with that. But then you ask, is there anything you can do to prepare for the possibility of your mom remembering? Not really. Other than being there for her, and again, a therapist being involved, there's not really much you can do. I hear it in the email. He's just like, oh my God, I'm so worried about my mom. It's so, I don't know, but if I heard this from my mom, I would be worried for her in a sense, but I wouldn't actually be practically worried about her remembering it. It sounds like your mom is like, oh my God, what if I remember it? What if it'll be, traumatizing to me? I wouldn't. I feel like people have a misunderstanding of like how these things work. Could a sudden memory pop in to her mind, and could that be a problem? Yeah, but in all likelihood, if it were my mom, I would predict that, okay, if she does remember, there might be some elements of it that will be very difficult for her to, as she's visualizing it, blood or whatever. There could just be a lot of images that are difficult for her. But I wouldn't worry that it was going to like break her or something, that it was going to destroy her personality somehow. I wouldn't worry so much about that. Could it? In a sense, maybe, but I don't know. I wouldn't worry so much about that. All right, this next email is from upper tier patron Georgia from Australia. She says, I was listening to one of your recent episodes and it got me thinking, are there ethical guidelines for therapists on how they need to secure their digital systems? For instance, is it best practice to encrypt their computer hard drives or use complex passwords to avoid hacking threats? End of email. Yeah, I could go on and on about this topic. It's complicated, and there's a lot of nuances, and there's a lot of things that I don't know about because I no longer supervise, and thus I haven't been keeping up to date on the issues. So I'm not the best person to ask this question. But yeah, absolutely. There are lots of ethical guidelines regarding this. It took a while for us to establish these because even though the internet and computers have been around for a long time, it takes a long time for my field to figure these things out. So, and there are still a lot of people who are non-compliant with this sort of thing, especially if someone doesn't understand how computers work. I find a lot of novice therapists are doing pretty well because they know this stuff, and also they will sign up with these online platforms like Simple Practice. They're basically an online mental health record platform that does all the work for you. They make sure everything is HIPAA compliant. They have all the right forms, and so novice therapists, or really therapists of any experience level, will use these services, and you put all your client records on there. You communicate with your clients through the website. You video conference with your clients through this website, and it's all HIPAA compliant, it's all encrypted, So there are solutions out there, but there's plenty of people who don't use those things. For example, me, I don't use those things, so I have my own security systems in place, such as encrypting and that sort of thing. So, yeah, there are guidelines, but there's a lot of people in violation. And of the people in violation of these guidelines and expectations and HIPAA laws, very few therapists will have something happen in which it's revealed that their system is bad, because it's not often that our security system is challenged, but there are cases, obviously, that are happening every day where a therapist is being revealed to have insufficient security measures, and that's a problem, and it needs to change. All right, this next email is from Upper Patron Taru from Finland. She says, "Am I turning good men into cheaters? I've been married twice now and cheated on both times. It's been about 1.5 years since my divorce, and I've started seeing someone new, and he's great. Partly, I worry about this because I read a study that said that people who have been cheated on are twice as likely to get cheated on again. So I feel like I might turn a nice guy into a cheater. My therapist doesn't see much point in discussing the study that I read. She says that statistics don't mean that it would happen to me again, and I get that that's true, but the increased risk of cheating still scares me. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Is the study I read BS? And if not, then what is behind the increased risk of getting cheated on again, and how do I minimize the risk?" And then she provided a link to the study, and I actually read the study. And so I want to read what the study actually found, because it's more specific than what you're saying. They found that those who knew that their partners in the first relationship had engaged in extradietic sexual involvement, so cheating. So those who knew that their partners in the first relationship had cheated, these people who reported it were twice as likely to report the same behavior from their next relationship partners. Okay, so correlation does not mean causation. Plus the methodology, I could go into the details of the methodology. By the way, this study is by Knopp, Scott, Ritchie et al., 2017, called "Once a Cheater, Always a Cheater? Serial Infidelity Across Subsequent Relationships." So without getting into the weeds on this study and all the other studies on this, it's really hard to tell what's going on here for a number of reasons. One, it's hard to tell if cheating happens to begin with, because you have to ask people to report it. In this study, they're asking people, did your previous partner cheat on you? And did your current partner cheat on you? So that's very hard to know if someone's report is accurate or not, right? Also, what constitutes cheating, okay? The other thing is that what you're pulling from this study, which is not what it's saying, is that if you were cheated on, then you're twice as likely to be cheated on again. And that is causation. I'd have to get into the weeds on probability and statistics and cause and how these kinds of research. The only way for research to show what you're saying that research has shown, I mean, it's not the only way, but it's the primary way, and we would never do this, of course, is if we took people and we took 100 people and put them into relationships, and then we made sure that 50 of the people were cheated on and 50 of the people were not. So we would instruct the 50 partners to not cheat, and we instruct the other 50 partners to cheat. And then we would set them off into the world, and then we'd have to actually monitor their partner's behavior somehow. We'd have to have an invisible drone that followed them around to see if their second partner were to cheat on them. So you understand that's how we do these kinds of causal studies, right? And that somehow having someone that so there's that. The other thing is that I think what you're thinking this is that, and it does have to do with your original question, is there something about me that's causing people to cheat on me? And that is a resounding no. There is nothing about you that is causing these previous husbands of yours to make literally thousands of decisions, personal, secret decisions, to betray you and harm the relationship. That is on them. You did nothing. Now, might you have done something or contributed to the deterioration of the relationship? Yes. Might you have done something? In all likelihood, you did. Might you have done something to contribute to the alienation of your husband? Perhaps. Hard to say. But by no means does that mean you caused them to cheat on you. So that's what I'll say for that. The other thing is all of us could enter into a relationship. All of us could be cheated on tomorrow. My wife could cheat on me tomorrow. There's no way for me to know that she won't. There's no way for us. We have this notion that somehow there's these wonderful relationships where you just have 100% trust and 100% and 0% probability of cheating. None of us have that. I guess I could cheat on my wife tomorrow. I can't imagine that happening, but like, things happen. I just cannot imagine that happening. But you just never know, right? Things get wonky sometimes. So none of us know, and you are trying to figure that out. You're like, it happened to me twice, and I get it. I mean, you've been traumatized. Cheating it can be a traumatic act. It's very affecting, right? You're just like, wait, so it happened both times. Is there something about me? I get that question. Another question that you could naturally ask is, am I doomed to always be in a relationship like this? Are all men like this in Finland? Do I attract men who cheat? These are valid questions. The answer to that, again, is you did not cause them to make the thousands of decisions that led them to cheating. Okay. So all we can do, this is all we can do as individuals, is to work on ourselves and work on our relationships and try to listen to our partners as best as we can. Because when we do that, then in all likelihood, the relationship will be stable enough and good enough and valuable enough such that someone won't want to jeopardize it by cheating. A lot of cheating happens when people are basically 9.5 toes out the door to begin with. They might not be able to admit that to themselves. Not always, of course. Certainly there are situations where that doesn't happen. The other thing is, cheating isn't necessarily the end of a relationship. So let's say, you're dating someone for 1.5 years and you really like him. Well, let's say he also cheats on you. And let's say that we could viably draw some connection to something in your personality or the way that you deal with relationships or something. Okay, fine. But that is secondary to your needs. Your needs are for attachment. So let's say that he does cheat on you, and let's say that your relationship is salvageable and you go into therapy, couple therapy, and you recover from that infidelity. Well, you could be stronger because of that. I'm not saying that infidelity is wonderful and you should invite it into your life and you should be skipping for joy if it happened. By it's the opposite, of course, but it's not a relationship killer. It sounds like it was for the previous relationships, The other thing I would watch out for are the kinds of behaviors or personality traits that you might consider to be normal. I don't know, but this is what I would explore with you, is like, what was it about these previous guys that we might be able to look back on that there were red flags of before you even got married that you just ignored because you were used to those kinds of things, like avoidance or narcissism or, I don't know, discounting of you, or I don't know, something. Who knows? It could also be that these past guys and these past relationships were, great. And sometimes good relationships, they drift apart and then one person cheats and it's awful and it happens. And it's not your fault is the thing. So there's that. The other thing is that I'd venture to say a lot of divorces have infidelity, particularly closer to the decision to dissolve the marriage, that are not revealed. I don't know, but anecdotally, there are a lot of people who are, say, contemplating divorce for 5 years, and they are like, should I leave? What about the kids? I don't know. And they're in that spot. They're like, I don't know if our marriage is worth working on, and I could keep trying to work on it, but we keep fighting, and we have these huge personality differences. And then, boom, 5 years down the line, still ambivalent, the person cheats. And then they're like, oh, I need to divorce, or something like that. And then they divorce, but they never tell the person they're divorcing from that infidelity had happened, because they're just like, well, what's the point in telling him at this point? I think that happens a lot, and it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it good, but I think that happens a lot. And so I think that the amount of infidelity that's happening in situations. So my point is that for you, upper tier patron Taru, that it's possible that they just told you that it happened, and you might be more normal than you realize. In fact, I'd just say that regardless, is that I think the way your email reads, it's like you're like, what's wrong with me? And I'd just be like, I don't hear anything about your history that's like, whoa, what's wrong with her? I'm just like, yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, there's so many details to those two relationships that you're in that we could go over, lots of nuances, lots of stories, lots of turns in the road, lots of milestones, lots of things to talk about and speculate as to when the relationship was really over as opposed to when it was divorced. And, it's just, it's life. And you just, stay in therapy, keep exploring your radar, the kinds of things you pay attention to. Explore the way you relate and your attachment vulnerabilities and how you communicate to your partner, because research does so. The stronger the relationship, the less likelihood that infidelity will happen, for sure. The less conflict, the less likelihood of infidelity. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, great questions, y'all, upper tier patrons, and everyone out there. Please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.